We are live.
Okay. I'll be around Christmas, not even time to have meetings, so.
Yeah, Mike already stopped by, so hi.
You ready?
Is Patricia coming?
She's gonna be late.
Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So roll call, please.
Commissioner Robbins is absent with prior notice. Commissioner Rushton is absent with prior notice. Chairman Bonnet.
Here.
Commissioner Wessel.
Here.
Commissioner Sotis Little is arriving.
She will be arriving soon.
Commissioner Alguier. Here. Commissioner Lochner. Present.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. That will bring us then to public comment. If you wanted to come forward, you have 5 minutes for public comment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Sanders. I'm the Township Supervisor in Leelanau Township. I understand today part of your meeting will be dedicated to talking about broadband and what we need to do in the county. First of all, I want to thank you for all the work you've done. There's a lot of heavy lifting here with the assessment of the peninsula, with potential recommendations. It's a very expensive proposition. I understand that. So I really thank you for your hard work and heavy lift on this. I also kind of believe I'm preaching to the choir here. I don't think there's anybody that questions what we need in terms of internet. It's almost become to me like electricity. Everybody needs it in their house. And we don't have that. So it's very important to our township, to our community. So as you're aware, when COVID started and since then, we've learned a lot about what we can do and what we can't do, but remote interaction, whether it be through a business, through your relatives, through your club, has become a standard. And that requires broadband internet, Zoom meetings, that type of thing. So we know, again, we know the need. People have discovered they can get medical care now, e-visits. There's so many reasons. The students, from if they can't get into the school, so many reasons. So again, I think I'm preaching to the choir here. This study that was done, I just want to call attention to page 52, I believe it is. It identifies 1,032 unserved households in Leelanau Township, not the county, in just the township. And that is the highest need revealed by this study for townships. So so we're number one in the county. That's not a number one that I relish for our township, but we are number one. So I'm here today to specifically ask for your help in prioritizing the solutions to help Leelanau Township. We have the greatest need. We need probably the most help. And we're also willing to sit down and talk anytime, anywhere about how we get this done. Understand a tower may be an option as opposed to a landline or fiber optic. I get all that. But I think it's important that we come up with a solution and with your help. So we need your help. We need you to prioritize, hopefully, Leelanau Township, and we will do our part in this process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Ooh, thank you. Thank you. My name is Larry Mobby. I'm here representing Peninsula Housing, which is a very young community land trust formed. We work intend to work throughout the county. Our focus is to provide affordable workforce housing for the residents of the county. And you'll hear from other people on the agenda about the need for housing in the county. I think everybody understands there is that. I'm not going to take your time to reiterate what you're going to hear from other people, but to urge you to recognize that this is very, very important for the county as a whole, that we are able to provide housing for families who want to live and work in the county. We, as a community land trust, are a bunch of volunteers with, we think, good intentions. We need help. And one of the best ways I think that the county can help us and other organizations that are working for the benefit of the residents of the county is to allocate some of the ARP funds to housing. And specifically, one of the things that we recognize that we need is technical help. If there's any way that you can make sense of the need for supporting organizations like ours and others by helping to fund, Housing North's program to provide technical assistance to organizations in the county, I urge you to do that. I think it would be really important for the county as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward. Yes, please. No.
Waving at me or not? Lois Bailey, Village of Suttons Bay, with my housing hat on, of course, today. So we are all in agreement that we have a housing crisis for sure. That's the easy part. How to solve it is the hard part. And kind of remembering back to my days when I was working on the Leelanau General Plan, and you would class this as a situation that's greater than local concern was the term that was used often. So being the umbrella organization over all the townships and villages, we need the participation of the county in helping us with some funds shared from the ARP funds that are going to be in front of you. And certainly as we go out and try to find support from these other townships and villages, they always would be asking, so what is the county doing? So I'm asking you to be an active participant in our problem and help us solve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady in purple.
Hi. The one green, I'm the one in purple today. Hi, I'm Beth Verhey, Leelanau Township, and I think you know I've been following this process closely. And I have been able to be in person at some of the meetings and listen in full to those that I've missed in terms of your past two dedicated discussions to the ARPA funds, and certainly echo our Leelanau Township supervisor here in acknowledging how much you've already done. Thank you for really the level of substantive discussion you've had in your two discussions so far, focusing on this. That's been really great to witness. It's certainly accurate and welcome. Mr. Janik's been highlighting the acknowledgements and recognition you've received for this county's being a bit ahead of others in terms of having the public call for expressions of interest, proposals, suggestions, priorities, that level of stakeholder engagement. I echo the comments that have just already been presented, and certainly have been really pleased to hear the level of consensus built and the move towards decisions, as Mrs. Elgar was emphasizing last meeting, but the level of focus on the broadband cellular internet category, the water and sewer. Not very many specific proposals came through on that, but those two areas that were a particular category under the ARPA funds are certainly important. And it's great to see this growing consensus on doing what is possible from these funds towards the indeed existing housing crisis we are in. I printed and brought a few copies with me of a Housing North survey that they do regularly. This is just the most recent one, where they interview employers and employees about the challenges they are having in recruiting and filling positions and being able to work. This goes beyond, their focus goes beyond Leelanau County specifically, but it does unpack that. And it echoes what was circling around in your conversation last month, is a sense of acknowledgement of the interconnectedness between what comes first. And it felt like a little bit of a chicken and egg classic kind of conversation. There were some comments that we need new and more industry first before there would actually be the need for this affordable housing, workforce housing. And these surveys and others, and there have been some other comments, that is not the case. We have already been in this situation for some time and will only continue to be, and I think it will help to pivot. These surveys also acknowledge the other factor that's been noted, and that's all the challenges around early childhood services and childcare. And certainly on the already being in the housing situation, Mr. Sanders could have told you 2 or 3 specific situations where our townships directly lost staff recently, county staff, good professional positions, township staff, due to not being able to find housing. What I want to emphasize, and it really, I've been wanting to hear more about, and I really hope today's discussion can turn towards a kind of place, kind of categorization of a decision. There's been some really good proposals about percentages and trying to watch priority categories. The topic that has not gotten enough consideration is what you've often been referring to as unmet needs. And indeed, the purpose of these funds is primarily to reach those most disproportionately affected by the pandemic, not to reach as many as possible, which has often been pointed to as the special value of some of the infrastructure and other investments that these funds are an opportunity for. And I really think that you need to move to some of deciding which proposals are really in kind of a gray zone, not clear that they are directly for the criteria of these funds, and select some. It's going to be less than 10.
I'm sorry, Beth, you're 5 minutes.
Okay, but really we need to move towards decisions on getting some funds, and those are the ones that are the most urgent. These other funds are going to take phases, and you have some of the funds already in the bank. Let's move some of that now to the most urgent needs.
My name is Doug Whitley, and I also live in Leelanau Township. And I was going to hold my remarks until after Matt spoke about the towers, because that's really why I came. But in the presentation that's been presented, I would like to emphasize, to follow up on the supervisor's comments, that of the over 1,000 parcels in Leelanau Township that are not currently served by internet, the 2 new towers that the county is planning on building will not service anybody in Leelanau Township. The radius just won't reach there. So my urge would be for a 3rd tower to be added to the plan, someplace north of the village of Northport. It's also important that I stress it's not just an internet issue, it's a 911 issue, and it's a cellular tower issue. If the county were to build a tower, I know that providers would put their equipment on that tower. I've had conversations with people about lack of access, or shall we say, concern about lack of access to a 911 call. If, for example, they're at the state park, or if, for example, if they're at Peterson Park, those access points are below hills and cannot currently be served. And we do have a tower at the fire hall, but it cannot handle any more equipment. So the best way to help service people who are currently unserved, but also people who have security concerns about their viability, if they were be injured or be involved in some kind of accident, we really need a third tower to be built someplace north of Northport. And as a PS to the supervisor's words, I've heard him say previously that he's prepared to spend ARPA money that comes to Leelanau Township to help make this happen. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yarrow Brown and I'm the Executive Director of Housing North. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to entertain proposals for the ARPA funds and hear the presentations today and consider housing as part of those. I just wanted to introduce myself, let you know we're a resource here, and to encourage you to lead with 4 other counties in our community to support technical service staff around housing that really will help us move towards solutions in our community. So thank you, and I will be here for questions during Trudy's part of the presentation.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Please come forward.
Thank you. I'm John Stimson with Homestretch Nonprofit Housing Corporation. I live in Leland Township, so this is a sort of a dovetail between my role in Traverse City with Homestretch, but we do overlap into Leelanau County. So, Chet, Mr. Janik, you received my letter with the request for funds.
Yeah, it's been
distributed, so everyone's had a chance to read that. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points in that letter that, according to Luke Forrest, Director of the Economic Development Association of Michigan, has given or has portrayed the use of RFP funds as allowable funds for affordable housing. So this is not something that's an ask that is out there beyond the scope of what these funds were related for. So I can appreciate your struggles having to find justification for some of the requests, but just wanted to point out that it is allowable. As far as how much money is going to be spent for affordable housing, it's a difficult task for anybody that's trying to put a housing project together if you're using affordable housing as your emphasis. So we could build market rate housing on a daily basis, and the revenue from the market rate rents is going to support whatever debt and every small amount of equity that we have to put towards the project to make it feasible. With affordable housing, you have a very little income stream, and that's why it's affordable to the residents. So you don't have that market rate rent available. So bringing that down to an income level to make it affordable, you have to increase your capital and reduce your debt. That's the only way to really play it out. In most industries that I've gone to get grant funds, we'll say between $50,000 and $75,000 is about a per unit grant allowance. And whether it's for a for sale property or a rental property, that seems to be the threshold to get the maximum impact out of funds. By doing that, you're actually giving the developer, like Homestretch or Habitat or whatever entity comes out, a chance to leverage those funds. And that, I think, is the key. I wouldn't say, let's put, a 10-unit affordable housing development, throw $1 million at it and be done. That'd be a one-off and you wouldn't have any other housing. So leveraging the funds is the key. And what is that number? Between 50 and 75,000. I have a project, which you're probably aware of, on Merrick Road with land donated by the land bank. Our current gap is about 24,000 per unit. And that has come down slightly, but it does depend on our having to raise $850,000 to date for an 8-unit project. I have that money banked in an account ready to go, but we can't pull the trigger or get in the ground unless we have a final 200,000. And that's also dependent upon a $200,000 grant from MISTA. So you can see I'm painting a picture that you have capital that needs to be thrown at these projects, a huge capital stack with a lot of categories. If it were possible, I would like to see some monies earmarked for this Merrick Road project. It's shovel ready, permit ready, zoning ready, pilot ready. And we could begin in the spring of 22 by getting in the ground and delivering a project ready for occupancy within 1 year's time. So spring of 23 would be the soonest we get a project ready for occupancy. And I would like to ask that you honor that request in that letter that I stipulated, and I'd be happy to share any other information or answer questions during this presentation or during this session.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this meeting this afternoon and our opportunity to speak. I'm Wendy Irvin. I'm the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity in the Grand Traverse region. I'm representing today on behalf of Leelanau County. Thank you for looking at our proposal. We had shared that with Chet. We're also part of the proposal from the Housing Action Committee, but I wanted to highlight some things that are of concern of ours very specifically. To John's point of the rising costs, we're looking at our about a 30% rising cost in construction. So our gap for next year, just in the construction of a 6-home development project in Maple City, is about a $300,000 gap. There's a different concern that we also have. It's that rising market rate, obviously, for us to be able to serve a family with affordable housing. They're purchasing the home at what is affordable to them at that 30% of their income towards housing. So on average, our homeowners are paying about $165,000 a house. The appraised value of the houses that we're building in Maple City came back at $286,000. So we're seeing a gap of almost $100,000 or more now, right? That's just the difference in the market rate. So we're going to have to overcome that, and we're willing to put the silent seconds on it as an organization, but there's still a major gap in just the construction costs. So this is pretty lofty for a nonprofit organization, but we're doing the best work that we've ever done. We're working as hard as we can to achieve these goals, and we appreciate the collaborative effort that we have here to make it happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Chairman, you received a letter from
Yes,
Mr. John O'Neill. He
Right.
just asked to put it in the record.
Okay.
And I
So,
passed it out to all commissioners.
I've got a letter here from John O'Neill concerning housing as well. So I'm a member of the county's Housing Action Committee, and we'll put this in the records that can be looked at online. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Then seeing that, then we'll move on to the purpose of the meeting and the discussion. So it's a continued review of the American Rescue Plan and the federal funding and proposals.
Just a brief update. And it's almost the same every time we meet. And trying to get some answers from Lansing on the $5 billion that's allocated to the state of Michigan. That's not part of the state budget, it's just sitting there. I was in a meeting last Monday with the Michigan Association of Counties, and Senator Vanderwell was there also participating. And it's anyone's guess when that money will be allocated. There's some movement. Broadband, internet, and affordable housing are priorities that most people at the state level agree is priorities. There's some discussion of allocating some of that money maybe before Christmas. If it does happen, it'll be next week. Some discussion about allocating the money in first part of January too. So there's no firm answer. Neither our state representative or our senator can give us a firm answer, but there is $5 billion sitting out there that is federal funds that the state of Michigan has. That's not part of their budget. It literally is there to be distributed. They could easily match every county's ARPA funding and still a surplus. But the only movement is there seems to be consensus on housing, broadband, towers, internet being a priority. When they'll be finalized or how it will be finalized is anyone's guess.
I did hear on the radio this morning that there is a push now for it to be used for the roads or road construction.
I've heard that also this
Yeah.
morning. Yes. So
So then that would bring us then, and our first item on our agenda would be the Solon Township request.
Hi there, Brian Raleigh with Fleece and Vandenbrink and Steve Yoder from Solon Township. And so we're here to answer questions today about, I'm a little unclear. We made two requests on behalf of Solon Township. One was for some park improvements in the village of Cedar. And the other request was for help funding a feasibility study for a sewer system in the village of Cedar. The Solon Township has taken some important initial steps in both of these projects. And that includes a needs study on their sewer system. They've asked us to help them facilitate taking a look at the needs in the village of Cedar for a sewer system. That's an important first step to build community consensus and evaluate the need. Now, the next steps following that is what we're here today to talk about, which is a feasibility study. That takes the information that we gather and develops that further into a plan, a service district, and ultimately costs both on the capital improvements as well as the ongoing operations and maintenance. The importance of that is that what we're asking for is to help with the feasibility study, and that'll put them in a position to request funding by sources such as Eagle revolving funds, USDA RD loans, and other sources. As you're aware, there's a lot of potential paths for funding coming down the pike. So are there any questions regarding that?
Yes, thank you. Steve? Brian?
Yes.
Brian? Thank you. How long will a feasibility study take for the village of Cedar?
The feasibility, we're wrapping up the needs assessment now. Again, that's something that the township has authorized and put some skin in the game to get that done. Feasibility report would typically take about 6 months. That's going to include evaluating properties, taking a look at the number of users that would be potential, and that's both for residential and commercial. I think if everybody's familiar with the village, there's, it's a low-lying area. We have issues with high groundwater. And what we're finding in the needs study is that if there are records available through the health department, a lot of these things were built, either the septic systems or the wells were built prior to records. So obviously, if they were built prior to having current records, they weren't built to the standards that we have today. We're also finding a lot of issues with water quality, nitrates in drinking wells, and we're finding even coliform in some of the well samples that are on record at the health department. Those are not necessarily a clear-cut indication, but it's definitely points to the issue of untreated wastewater. So we have high groundwater, shallow wells, and drain fields that are they're not able to go through a filtering process like a lot of communities where you have dry soil underneath the drain field because it's so saturated there. So they're unable to, the businesses are unable to grow, to expand. And so we look at the countywide benefits for a sewer system for the village are pretty incredible.
If I just may finish, like you said, it's not going to take long to find the need because the need is the entire village, all the residents and out commercial. It is very sad there. And it also ties in, we've heard a lot about housing, but this project has also created a situation where the homes are unaffordable, even those living in them, because they're just having to pump them out all the time. They're just, it's definitely living conditions really ideal for them. And I know people who wanted to purchase homes because they seemed quite affordable, but once they found out the situation, they just do it. So the need is very, very much.
Yeah, pumping and hauling, that's a very costly endeavor for a home. Systems that are in place don't have the room necessary to build a reserve field if their existing field fails. And then just the ability to isolate the water wells from the sewer, the drain fields gets pretty difficult with, and these are older parcels, they're usually smaller. And so when you start applying all of the standards that you would need to apply under current health department regulations, it just is simply not feasible to expand or to build out even undeveloped parcels in the village.
So just a couple things. So you're saying that you're asking for 36 feet.
Yes.
Which I totally hear you on the septic and the old septic. I heard someone was talking about the fact that a gas station in town used to dump all their oil into the swamp.
That's a newer, I've heard that as well, talking with Clay at the health department. When we're looking at the needs study and pulling the well and septic records, a couple things became pretty evident. One was that the need for a drain field and the correlation between wells and septic systems. He indicated that there are some VOCs. I don't have that data in front of me, but what he was finding was that any of the new wells that they have to develop are much deeper, so they're much more expensive. So the deeper the well is, a couple things happen. Number one is the cost goes up. Number two is to get through confining layers to protect you from any potential hazard. Typically what happens is the water quality can go down as well. So it's definitely, there's kind of two things going on here, both relating to infrastructure for businesses and residences.
So I'm glad you're getting it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one clarification, your request is for 36.8, and you said you were willing to contribute part of that, or are you asking the county for the entire amount?
We're asking for the 36.8. The part that the township has done is started with the needs study, so they funded that. The other kind of forward-thinking project that this one township has taken on is a 5-year master plan for the Parks and Rec Committee. Again, these are steps that townships can take in order to put them in a good position to apply for and secure funding. Not just ARPA funds, but if the community does not have a 5-year park and rec plan, DNR grants and other grants are just simply not able to be applied for. So we're seeing something in Solon Township. I think it's really a grassroots effort to improve the village, and there are some things that are specifically holding back the ability for the village of Cedar to grow and be prosperous. So does that answer your question?
Well, clearly this has been on your radar for some time, and you're doing a lot of good work to get you in a position. How much was the need study? And then the second question is did you receive any ARPA funds for your township?
The township did receive ARPA funds. I don't know the specific
It's
value.
113,000.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm sorry, what was the other question?
You said you funded the earlier effort to establish the.
Correct. The township did, and I believe that was around a $4,000 or $5,000 effort.
Well, thank you for the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
No, well, comment?
Sure.
Yeah, he just touched on the Parks and Rec plan, and it does all tie together. One of the situations we've got right now in Cedar is Solon Township is providing a porta potty down near the parks. And it is costing the township a lot it has to be pumped out, as it, I believe, twice a week. Service personnel use it. There's no public restrooms in Cedar. So it's heavily used because it's a pretty main thoroughfare through center of the county. So all of the service personnel going through are using that. And so this would help a lot. The park itself, could expand on in the future, but it is really, the concept is really awesome. And it includes boat wash stations, and handicap accessibility to the river. And I would just say any amount that if we had to donate towards that would help a lot. Solon had been awarded, I believe, $1.2 million, Steve, by the state for that project. And the next day COVID hit and the state pulled back those funds. So that was just really unfortunate because the state did recognize the importance of that project for the community because it does all tie together. So that's my comment.
So are we clear that there's two separate individual funding requests? One for the sewer feasibility study, and then the other was the park improvements. And so really what that boiled down to, they do tie together because of the need for a public restroom down at the Cedar River Park, and then the ability to build out the park, the ball fields, the Polka Fest areas, and just all of that public use area that's so important to the county. And again, I think the important thing to stress is just the location of the village of Cedar in the county, the number of users. We did a survey for the Parks and Rec Master Plan, which is part of the process that we do. And we started at the Polka Fest. We didn't get as many because it was a handwritten survey. Didn't get as many responses there. So the township really got active and provided electronic surveys. And we saw such a impressive amount of public comment. There's a lot of public interest in the parks, and as I said, the bathrooms and the sewer system do lend themselves to work together. So
this is for Steve. The request for the park is 600,000 to 950,000, which is a big share of our total pot. If we were to be able to give you some, but nowhere near close to the 600,000 to the 950,000, what would be your plans to try to come up with additional funds?
Well, we've reached out to the state as well. I know what Commissioner Lautner alluded to earlier was the fact that we had just under $1 million allocated to the state that actually passed through the House. And the governor was expected to sign it, but then obviously the next day COVID hit. So we had 900,000 allocated just specifically for that, which ended up getting pulled back. We did put a request into on the federal government side of things that did not go through, type of thing, as they had a lot of requests on that side, in the first district in general. But that's, right now in the township, we simply just don't have the funds or the resources necessary to do that. So we'd definitely be looking into, the state for help or other funds or grants or whatever to help out on that as well.
if I could just add on to that. So one of the issues with federal funding, we utilize a number of programs. The state revolving funds are the state funds, and then USDA and rural development is a program that we can utilize for improvement projects, both utility wise or community facilities. Some of the exciting things are that the terms and programs that are available are better than they've ever been. I've been doing this a long time. On the USDA side, poverty community can secure a 40-year loan for just over 1%. That's an impressive way to fund a project. Some of the issues are that Solon Township is a large township. The village of Cedar is a small unincorporated village within a township. And thus the township does not qualify for poverty interest rates for some of those programs. So we're currently waiting for the new census data to come out. The way that USDA and rural development categorizes their They have market, intermediate, and poverty rates. And the way they categorize that is by median household income per jurisdiction. And Solon Township, I believe, was $18 over the limit to meet those requirements. So we're waiting to see what those MHIs are coming out of the new census data. And if that trend continues where the township median household income, because we have a lot of lakefront property owners, but then we've got the village of Cedar that's really in need. There's some things that we can do as well. We can get creative and maybe do an assessment of just the village and do more of a focused plan on income for the village, which may open up new pathways for funding opportunities.
Thank you. But I guess I was just wondering, because I know with Leland, they did a bonding, to cover the additional cost, and Northport has done the same thing, but that you're saying that's not available because of the township so large and it's not incorporated?
No, not necessarily. There's, so let's just play forward that we're going to build a system and we're going to own and operate that system in the village of Cedar. It requires large capital cost. Those things can be bonded. They can be funded in a number of ways. They can be bonded privately, local banks. Typically, those are going to be shorter term, 15 to 20-year bonds and market rates. A USDA rural development grant loan program is a bonding program. It's a revenue bond program. So they take a look at the number of users, what would be generated on a per user monthly charge, a sewer bill, if you will. And they'll typically take a look and make sure that the residential rate for a sewer bill is what they deem affordable. And they have a calculation for that, which is 1.5% of the median household income. And so they do a calculation, and if the cost of the bond exceeds that, then they can throw grant dollars at it. The SRF, the state revolving fund, again, that's a bonding program as well. Usually it's a 30-year term. They don't use the word grant, they use the word principal forgiveness. But these are all bonding programs of some sort. And really what we've heard is that in order to keep rates reasonable for the residents and businesses, to bond something fully without any assistance from a program such as USDA or SRF simply is not going to be feasible.
I believe each Northport and Leelanau Township resident and the sewer system paid about $20,000 up front, and then $1,000 a year. Very expensive. And not sure that it addresses affordable housing.
We don't want that system. I didn't support that system. Yeah, I think we have the ability. I think, and I'm hoping it shows, to do something much simpler than what we had to do before.
You don't want to have the highest cost sewer system in the country.
No, thanks.
So I believe the statute of limitations have passed, but I can confirm that oil is being dumped by the gas stations and for repair gas stations in Cedar. And I know some young men that used to do that. I'll just leave it at that. But when there was too much oil, it would be dumped in the swamp. But either the farmers would come and pick it up and they would dump it in their fields or their gravel, or we had too much. I mean, when they had too much, the truck didn't come in time. It was the job of the steel workers to go and get rid of the oil.
Well, to be fair for Cedar, Traverse City owns one of the largest tar pits right behind the candle factory in Traverse City that's been covered up, paved over, and
It was a very common
with a
practice.
wink and a nod, let's just
Very common
pretend it's
practice.
not there. And it's right on the bank. So yeah, it was very common. I'm sure every community.
And the the scale and size of a system for something like the village of Cedar is much different than what Northport ended up with designing and building. So
Would it provide other additional lots for affordable housing? If it, depending on how they design it, or,
Yeah, so one of the issues is just vacant land near the downtown area. If you can't develop the property, there's been some talk of a developer building a number of homes. And so, he's really looking at, and I understand this from the affordable housing question is, when you have a land cost and to develop that and get a return, to put in a private septic system for a number of homes to get the numbers up to make it feasible. The cost, the regulations, the permitting and ongoing operations, you still have to manage those, whether it's a water system or a sewer system. And we do have a desire to build housing near the village of Cedar that simply, it could be done more dense, which is going to improve the cost for the ultimate owner. So,
and just to address that, we do have a developer that proposed to put 32 housing units right behind Bunting's there, and just south and west of there. And he initially, his proposal was to put the sewer system right in there at the well, but with the swamp and everything and how tight everything was, he had to put the well pretty much clear on the other side of the property, bring it under a sleeve over, pump all the water in, and then have the sewer system there. So with this system that would have been in place would have been much cheaper for him, regarding that. So there's definitely a lot of potential there. We have quite a few vacant buildings there, and just empty lots that simply nobody is willing to invest in, simply because they'd have to have holding tanks, which would just add the cost to a lot of businesses in the area there. So there's definitely a lot of potential there. And I know for a fact that, if this were to go through and we could put something in the community there like that, it'd bring a huge amount of life to the community.
When you consider septic systems versus new development, you have talked to people in Empire about their community.
Yep, no, I certainly have been in contact with them. Certainly they put a unique project in there that's very, drew a lot of interest with me. And it's something that we'll definitely, I'm sure, be working with them and seeing if something like that is applicable to our community.
And there seems to be a lot of pluses.
Right, I agree.
any other questions for them? All right, thank you very much. We will consider it very seriously.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I did have coffee in Cedar this morning.
Very
Very nice coffee shop.
Thank you.
He got lost, but I helped him find his way to downtown Cedar.
North Fork is a long way from Cedar.
It is.
But go ahead and make a habit
It's
of
not
that.
a good way to get there either.
Well, in all seriousness, there are actually fewer houses in Cedar there now than there were 60 years ago. And that is a big reason. I know people, for a fact, a lot of people have tried to build or the downtown stores, a couple of them have been vacant for years. We're talking about a restaurant, a laundromat over the years, but the lack of sewer system has hampered all that.
I know they've been at it for as long as
Many years.
All right, so then that brings us to the tower upgrades. Here.
Good afternoon. Okay, so to give a little update on the tower projects, we had a new tower proposed for here at the government center, and then extending up the Maple City Tower from 195 to 300 feet. And with the government center tower, we decided to go out and perform a soil engineering study in order for a adequate foundation to be designed by the vendors. And I'm happy to say we have the results back. So I've been through it. Much earlier than we thought. I did not expect it to come before the holidays were over.
I think that's important.
Yes.
It changes the timeline.
It does. So I've been able to go through it. I'm not an engineer, but it does say that a foundation is feasible to support the tower. Now, what they were intending to do was to bore 2 holes, one down to 60 feet and one down to 20 feet, just to get examples of the soil structure at the tower site. When they did the drilling, I think 2 weeks early, which was also nice. But they encountered hard packed clay at 40 feet. And they consulted with their engineer and they didn't have to go any further than 40 feet. So they did a 40-foot bore and a 20-foot bore. So that boded well for us. We should be able to get this information to the vendors who continue to call me multiple times a week to get an update. So they'll be happy to hear this. And then they can start to formulate their total design plans for the project.
As you remember, we were hoping to have the studies back mid-January, so we're a month ahead when we planned, which obviously moves up to going out for bids again, because we're going to be in the process with this new information.
Yeah, so we will publish this with the RFP, make sure the vendors can get that and turn it around. Yeah, so we're looking good on this project. Any questions with it?
I have more of a comment, and I was, the last meeting we talked about down the road for successful getting this tower up and that the vendors who are on it, or you, what do you want to call them?
Lessees, yeah,
Okay,
co-locators.
We'll use it, we'll all need a building down below for their equipment. And I was in another conference this week, and they were internet providers talking. And what they have done, and this is actually downstate, but what they have is one community building, like I suggested we might do here, and have, you know, individual, I was thinking individual doors to access from the outside so they can offer price. And they said, oh no, they should all come in the one door, but they all have their private offices all, and it's one building for all the providers, and there's no problem with privacy or anything else like that. So apparently they're doing it, and so I think it could work here without having to have a whole sprinkling of more buildings on our campus.
Correct. I think that we could achieve that with ISPs. So if we had our own county shelter, we could make it a larger shelter and divvy it off, just like you said. I don't suspect that AT&T and Verizon would take part in that, but they have different options. Like with AT&T at the Northport and Omena Tower site, they just use all their equipment open. So they put it on a platform, so it's open to the elements. So as long as it's fenced off, they're good with that. That's not going to be as much of a footprint as a tower shelter would be. So we may be able to not have as many little buildings sprinkled around, like you said. So that's
Maybe
good.
I'd be interested in being out of the weather if it's feasible too. They may be interested.
True.
Any other questions or statements?
I have a question about Supervisor Sanders' request, but I don't know if you're done with.
I'll touch on the Maple City and then we
Go
can.
ahead, and then but I
we
don't
can
want him to
discuss.
get away before I ask. You
Right.
a
I think we all-
Will do. All right, so the Maple City project, that one came back less favorable, and that's basically due to the tower manufacturer Belmont Towers discontinuing that model. So in order for them to support putting new steel on that tower, they just inflated the price. And as one of our vendors approved in their proposal, it would be cheaper to build a new tower than it would be to add to this existing tower. So that's another decision that the board would want to make, how to proceed with that. We would work with the township and the planning commissions in order to identify this project and have a collaboration moving forward.
We did talk to the township supervisor last week. Greg, Julian, and Matt and I had a discussion with him, and then I met with him, I think Thursday, and then I know sent him.
Yeah, I followed up with him.
He seems supportive. There's a big demand for it. He's gonna have an informal dialogue with his board members, township board members this week. Because we want to make sure we're upfront. There were some false rumors floating around. Just remember, some people coming with concerns and everything. So we thought we'd just be right up front. And Greg agreed that the potential is there and he's gonna get feedback back to us. So we're all thinking the same as we go forward with this project.
What about tearing down the old one?
That's what would happen if we,
Who supports that cost?
It would be in, that was all included in the proposal by that one vendor. So it would be a tear down and reconstruct. And it was over $60,000 less than adding to the existing
And
tower.
that's on rented property, isn't it? Or-
It is. We lease the property.
So we have to talk with the VCs about changing it?
We would have to, we do have a verbal confirmation that they're in favor of moving it up to 300 feet. Changing the structure, we could have that conversation with them as well. I do believe that they will be in favor. They have been pushing for this for many, many years to get a bigger tower right there.
I had the same response when I talked to them.
Well,
Yeah,
I just
so,
wanted to make sure that we did it. that,
Oh,
you know,
yeah, we're trying to be very open and
Yeah.
as we can have dialogue with everyone. So get rid of any false assumptions out there, but it seems to be supported. And Mr. Julian will have further dialogue with us probably next week.
Yes.
Matt, in terms of timing, switching from one tower to another tower, while the new tower is being built, will the cellular folk and the ISPs that are on the Maple City Tower remain and then switch? I mean, how do you perceive this working?
What would have to happen is there would probably be about a week period to where the tower was deconstructed and then a new one was put up there. For the cellular carriers, what they would do is they'd bring in a mini tower site and have their equipment on there operating, so there wouldn't be any interruption in service. With the ISPs, I'm not sure of their capabilities with that. Some of the companies are larger, they may have a different ability like the cellular companies as well, but the smaller ISPs would probably have a week of zero service for that area.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I wonder where I live is probably the outer edge of, one of the outer edges of where that goes, where that cell signal goes. We get one bar. And it flickers.
A lot of that has to do with the
Think that
equipment.
help?
It could, depending on the equipment that they put on there. The 5G that a lot of the cellular companies are going to, the range is smaller than what we're used to. So they actually need more pockets to fill in order to project the 5G.
So we need more towers even beyond these.
There could be smaller towers that they could put in there, yes. But that would need property owners in order to give up the space and all that good stuff. So there'd be a lot of conversations that they would have to have.
Plus zoning.
Plus zoning. A lot of the townships, and not all of them are the same, but if they have a zoning requirement of anything over 60 feet. So if there's a tower less than 60, there's a lot less requirements in order for them to put up the towers. And with the terrain, especially around your area, is it going to get over a hill at 60 feet? Probably not. So some things that they have to do, propagation studies in order to get a good feeling of where they can go.
Okay.
Well, I'm conscious of that I'm represent the whole county, but I have put my Leelanau Township hat on.
Mhm.
And I am concerned that we have a tower in the fire hall that can't handle any more equipment. So we can't solve our problem. We've got no emergency contact north of Northport, no broadband Wi-Fi, and we gotta figure out a solution. And I've been told that Leelanau Township has the tower friendliest zoning ordinance in the county. So how do
Sounds
we
right.
get a study done to look at how we might get booster towers or replace the single tower that's in Northport with a tower that can handle more equipment?
It's not necessarily that the tower can't hold the equipment. It's more of the 5G radius that's going to get into play. So, I mean, even if we went to 400 feet, it would expand, but I can't guarantee that it would reach the tip of the mitt for us. Another problem that we're gonna run into is Woolsey Airport. That was the main deterrent when the Northport Tower was originally installed at the Northport Fire Station. Is that kind of, I think Smith Road or not Smith Road, I forget, I was before my time. So I'm only remembering what I've read, but there were a couple different areas that they were identifying. And the Woolsey Airport kind of impeded that progress. So we may be able to get away with it if we target something up toward the lighthouse area, Cathead Bay properties and whatnot. I am unfamiliar if there's township owned property up there. That would be ideal because we already have an intergovernmental agreement with the township. But if we have to try to find an independent property owner, we do that with two other towers as well. So identifying the place and getting the agreement in order to move forward would be paramount for that project. But based on the towers that have been put up in Leelanau Township, I agree that they're pretty friendly about it. And I don't think that there would be as much conflict as we may see at other towers.
Well, I hope we can continue to have conversation about it and maybe do a little bit of review of possibilities and options. I've been told that the original tower is by the fire hall because AT&T wanted it there. The real design was away from the fire hall up on a hill, but AT&T, I understand, said we don't want it there. I don't know if that's true, but I'm sure we could solve the problem.
Okay. Yeah, we may have to look at engineering vendors, kind of like Krishar, in order to do the feasibility, the propagation study, in order to see where a great location would be for Leelanau Township.
You know, one more comment, I'll be done, but as we look at 4.2 million and everything's important, but I can't think of anything more important than making sure that everybody has emergency services.
Would it help, Matt? And I don't know, he's must have left.
Yeah.
That just by, it'd be very helpful, I think, for you, Matt, Leelanau Township would identify a site
I agree.
versus us trying to identify a site. It's an issue if they can identify a site and then work with Matt. I'm sure we can go out and get it for an RFP at least and get some cost. But without having a site in this place, it's hard for Matt to come up with a cost estimate.
Well, maybe we can, we'll invite Matt up to meet with John Sanders and drive around.
I did see the Leelanau Township at $157,000. So to do an engineering study, they could, I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but they could certainly allocate the funds to do an engineering study. I think would be helpful for Matt if he actually knew a specific site.
Yeah.
Because if not, we're just guessing and not knowing. I hate to have Matt spend a lot of work without knowing what the end outcome would be. But if the township could identify a specific site, say, this is what we want, this is where we think it'll work, it'd be fairly easy for Matt to go out and get an RFP then.
Well, I know that the letter that Supervisor Sanders sent to us said that the township was interested in putting their money forward.
Does that make sense, Matt?
Absolutely. I'd be open to having that meeting, driving around if we have to look at sites. Yeah.
Especially the site that the township owns.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
And then, do they fall under zoning? Does the township fall under zoning?
I do believe that they would. It'd be a new structure. Wouldn't necessarily be replacing something that's already there. But I think that we'd be able to work with the planning commission in order to address the needs and get a
They
permit.
seem more open to towers than 25 years ago. Very much so.
But if they could do step A of the process, that would really be helpful for you and be helpful for this board to make a decision. Because right now, this board can't make a decision if they have no idea what the costs are, what the odds of it being approved. Hate to do all this work and find out the township says no to it.
Right.
I know they happened quite a few years ago at Glen Lake. As I understand, a lot of work went into it, prices were firmed up and everything, and all of a sudden the township said no, for whatever reason. So it just seems like if the township could do the work up front, come back with a proposal, saying, we know we have 2 or 3 sites here. Can you give us an estimate on the tower? Then you could follow up on that.
Yes. I-
And in
we should
response
be
to
able to do that.
Mr. Lautner's comment, yes, when we did their survey of all of the different zoning requirements for communication and towers, I'd say Leelanau Township was the easiest, and some of their officials have approached since and said that they would be very interested in working. They're very eager to get this fixed.
And I would say that maybe the road commission has some property, that would be something that you could look into. Because I mean, then we have the one over there by Leland that's on basically the road commission's property.
Yep.
And then any parks or anything, whatever they're willing to allow a tower to be. Because it'd be much better than on private property, but you can always go there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Any from you? Yeah.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and that would bring us to affordable housing request.
Yes, I'm going to ask Yarrow to join me because later on in my presentation, I have some stuff on technical assistance and I'd like her to join on that too. Laurel has the PowerPoint up, but I also made copies. In case you want to follow along on the copy.
It's 3 p.m.
Okay. So first thing I'd like to mention is that most of the organizations that I have listed here in my presentation today are represented here today by either members in the audience or we have Commissioner Lautner and Commissioner Wessel, who are both on our Housing Action Committee. So I'll start on the next page. And what I'm going to do is I've watched some of your meetings and I heard some of the questions and I thought the best way to do this is kind of take us back a little bit and give you a little history of what we did in Leelanau County on housing. I won't spend too much time on that, but then I want to go into some of the organizations that are working on housing issues and then end it with opportunities of where I think you can use ARPA funding. So first, on this next page is just an outline for you of the grants that we have administered through our office on behalf of Leelanau County since 1993. So the year of the grant is listed on the left-hand side, and those are usually 2 or 3 year grants. And then we show the amount of the grant, what we leveraged, and then the program income, which is repayment of existing housing loans, the total, and then whether we did construction or rehab projects. So since that time, we did 29 new projects and 200 rehab projects, which breaks down to about 15 rehab projects each grant. Next slide, please. The success stories that I want to show to you today is new construction. We did 19 new construction projects through MISTA with these grants. 8 of them are in Lake Leelanau under the Prumont Pines condominium, 3 in Sutton's Bay and 2 in Northport. Those are single family homes. Another 4 in Empire Village, which is a new neighborhood. And then 2 of them were in Centerville Township, and those are homes that we obtained from the National Park Service within their district boundaries, and we moved them into Sugarloaf subdivision. Out of those 19 homes, 17 of them had affordability restrictions on them. The 2 that were in the park that we moved, we did not put affordability restrictions on those. And then there were 10 other homes that were constructed. We purchased 2 lots through our grant funds were Habitat developed homes. We took out a trailer and replaced that with a modular for a homeowner. We demolished 1 existing home and did new construction because of the condition of that home wasn't worth it to rehab it. And then there was also another project where a 3rd National Park home came out and was moved over to Sugarloaf subdivision. That was done through REACH, excuse me, and also through the county. And then there were 4 projects, 4 single family homes done by REACH in Northport, and Land Bank Authority also contributed into that project, as well as the next project, which is a single family home in Maple City done by the Land Bank with assistance to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for environmental studies. And then the project was ultimately built and sold by Habitat. In addition, Habitat has constructed 11 other homes since 1995 in Leelanau County. Next slide. The proposed projects that we have coming up is 6 new homes. There are 3 duplexes in Maple City, and Wendy Irvin mentioned those earlier. That is a joint effort between the Land Bank Authority that holds the property, Habitat for Humanity, who will construct the project, construct the homes, and then the Flaska family who sold the property to the Land Bank Authority. And then there are also 14 proposed new single-family units in Elmwood Township, which is being done through New Waves Church and Habitat. Next slide. In addition, there are 8 proposed units, apartment units in Suttons Bay Township on Merrick Road. Again, this is a collaboration between Land Bank and Homestretch, and John Stemson mentioned this earlier in a public comment. So these are some drawings of what these might look like. Next slide. The common element that I wanted to point out through all of these projects, especially when the county was involved, is that we had leveraging and or subsidy on these projects. That's what made it work. We had grants, loans, loans from the state or loans from the bank that we had to pay back, funds from nonprofit organizations, donations, which came in the form of donations either from the park homes or materials and so forth. And then we had reduced costs from landowners, engineers, and architects for our work, as well as donated materials and time. And then the next slide comes from a presentation that was done by the Michigan Land Bank Authority by Jim Tischler. And I wanted to point this out because this really shows where we're trying to work. So if you look at the 3 colors on the left-hand side, those dark blues and black, that's really what we talk about as affordable housing. These are individuals that are at 80% or below the area median income, and they qualify for some type of public assistance, either through vouchers that they might be able to get, projects that are LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits for rental housing, or perhaps funding like they got from our programs for rehab through CDBG or home-funded units that were constructed. On the far right in the dark orange is our market rate housing. So those are the market rate units that are sold. People are usually 120% or higher area median income. So we have that area on the blue, and then we have this gap in the lighter orange, which we're referring to as attainable housing. These are people who are, you know, they have an income that puts them above any public housing. They don't qualify for it, but they also don't make enough where they can purchase the market rate. So what do we end up with? We end up with a gap. And how do we fund that gap and try to get housing so that we can keep these individuals in our communities? The next slide shows the lessons learned. These are my takeaways since we've been doing this project in the county since 1993 is leveraging and or subsidy is crucial for affordable housing and attainable housing. That's how we were able to get these units in. That's why we still have affordability restrictions in place on them. Joint efforts on the housing projects end up with positive results. You have community buy-in and support. You have sharing of the work and sharing of the cost. And it can be public, nonprofit, private, or kind of a joint effort with all of them. And then every unit builds an opportunity for another family that is looking for housing. So if we can get somebody into housing, if they were in a rental situation, that can open that rental unit up to someone else. And it also helps keep our kids in our schools and our workers right here in the county. The next slide shows some of the agencies working on housing, and you've heard from some of them this morning under public comment. So in italicized next to them, I've just kind of pointed out what are some of the housing things that they are working with, either new homes, rehab, rental, and so forth. Peninsula Housing is a new one, as you heard from Mr. Mobby this morning. And then, of course, you have the county. We've had Land Bank, Brownfield, Housing Action Committee, and our department involved in housing over the years. And then I just wanted to point out one other committee that I was invited to be a participant on, and that is the Michigan Association of Planning Zoning Reform Advisory Committee. It's 16 members across the state, as well as a consulting team and 2 staff members. And we are working on issues that we might be able to change through zoning laws to assist with housing, because housing is not just an issue here, it's an issue across the state and across the country. So we are trying to look at what can change through our laws that might make things a little easier. And now I'll get down to my final slide. So the next slide shows the housing opportunities for the ARPA funds. And I basically broke these down into 4 categories, and then each one I'll spell out a little bit more. So we have housing rehabilitation, technical services, leverage and subsidy funds for projects, and financial support for the Land Bank Authority. So the next slide shows the housing rehabilitation. With that, we're talking about emergency repairs or repairs for health and safety for individuals and how to improve the home so they can have an upgrade to appliances and energy efficiency and so forth. The organizations that are working in that category are the Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency, which is currently under contract with the county to use some of our remaining funds. Habitat for Humanity, Leelanau Christian Neighbors, and then of course the county, which was through my department, we ran that program. When I spoke with Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency, they said the need is even greater than it's ever been. They are getting an average of 3 inquiries per week. That was before I put the advertisement out that they have funds, so it's ticked up since then. But the funds that they're using from the county are limited to only emergency funds. So if it's anything that's not emergency, let's say they need to replace old windows, but they're not cracked or broken, it's not going to fall into emergency category. So they're able to assist in some areas, but there is a great need. And the material costs have gone up. You heard that this morning as well under public comment. So there's a great need for additional funds to keep helping these individuals. Next is Habitat, and they've extended their priority home repair or PHR program services annually. Again, the need is here and it's growing. Because the housing market is also out of reach for many in the region, it's very important that we maintain our housing stock for healthy and safe living. And that is something that we pointed out back in 1993 when we first went for a CDBG grant for Leelanau County for rehab work. That is very important to maintain our housing stock. Habitat is also a certified aging in place specialist, so they can offer accessibility upgrades for our senior population, which is our fastest growing population in this county. And Habitat CEO is on the Mishta Housing Plan Advisory Council, and they note that the critical home repairs is a growing priority across the state. So Habitat budgeted for 50 of these projects in 2022 at an average cost of $10,000. That's $500,000 right there for next year for these projects. They're interested in opening up dialogue and have an opportunity with Leelanau County to access funds similar to what they're doing with Grand Terrace County for these projects. And then last, I talked with Leelanau Christian Neighbors. They just started their housing efficiency program this year and it's going very well. They've used up over $30,000. They're working with Leelanau Energy on their projects, and Northern Building Supply is also a partner with them. The next slide shows another opportunity, which is technical services. And this would be through Housing North for some services. And basically, I'm going to kind of summarize it quickly and then turn it over to Yarrow for a little bit. Is we're looking at what's missing here. In Leelanau County, we have zoning administrators, and there are just a few communities that have planners, but they work for the communities. They don't work for the landowners. They don't work for the developers. So when those individuals come in, if they're not familiar with our county, if they're not familiar with all the permit process and site plan review and so forth, they have a tough time. And over the years, I've seen projects stop because they can't get through the process, or they've spent too much time, too much money, and they end up turning it over to somebody else. So we talk about a financial gap, but this is another gap, is we don't have technical services there to help get these projects through to that end zone. And Yarrow, I'll turn it over to you to make any other comments you want on what Housing North can do for technical services.
Okay, so this is a program that's modeled after 2 communities that we're working in Emmett County and Charlevoix County, where we have boots on the ground working in those communities. Each community has a different funding mechanism for how we fund that position, but we want them to be at least 3-year positions. So we're looking for, technical services from each of the communities or units of government in Leelanau County, as well as private philanthropy, to put this position on the ground. And really, they are working, in this case, they would be addressing the needs and the goals set through the Housing Action Committee, as well as other communities. And Steve Schnell has been on board for almost 2 years now. And there's a couple links we can share with you. There's a YouTube video in Emmett County, and then in Emmett County, we're hiring we should put that person in place and full-time in January. We did have a part-time position up there, and we realized really quickly that it was a full-time job and really needed to increase the capacity for that position. We're also working in Manistee County and have fundraised for about 80% of the position in that situation. So really, it's a technical services contract for services that Housing North negotiates with the units of government. And we agree to work with the different housing groups. So in this case, you have one main housing group, but it would also be if the different villages or townships had one, they would work as that conduit to make sure that they're meeting the needs and the goals of that community. So it's a new program, but we call it a housing ready program, because really not only do we need new units and numbers of units in our communities, but we're also finding, especially in places like Leelanau County, even though you have excellent staff, a treasurer and a land bank and a brownfield authority that's working, there's still a gap in getting our communities housing ready through zoning, through supporting, as Trudy mentioned, that the existing staff and planners and zoning administrators, as well as just cultivating that environment maybe for developers that you do want to see in your community, and getting the communities comfortable with the new tools and the new opportunities like a community land trust, or supporting projects like John and with Habitat, or with Homestretch, and Wendy with Habitat, for example. So we feel like it's all hands on deck to address this housing shortage. It's not just the units of government, it's businesses, nonprofits, and the community and units of government to help move the needle. So in this case, we're asking for a portion to come from Leelanau County. We feel like if the counties lead, when we go to ask the townships, they will also be asking, well, what about the county? And so we raised already $30,000, $10,000 per year to support this position through philanthropy, through the Leelanau Township Community Foundation. And we'll also be looking to other private foundations to support this as well. So happy to answer any questions, but just wanted to share that.
But
Larry Mobby spoke to the need for technical services in his public comment. And I know we've all talked about, we don't want to spend money for positions, but we're really not talking, you're really not talking positions. I mean, but somebody's got to do the work. But the technical services are all those things that need to be done in order to encourage development. Tell me a couple more of those. What services would that be? Locating developers? Would it be fundraising? Would it be?
It could be all of those things. I think it kind of, in Steve Schnell's case, he's working with 3 different housing groups, 3 different municipalities, as well as the county. So in that case, he's developed mostly programs to meet those needs. So one of them is a deed restriction program, because they're really, they don't have enough year-round housing in the city of Charlevoix. They're also looking at an accessory dwelling unit program so that they can promote more accessory dwelling units to kind of offset that short-term rental impact. And then he's also working directly with the county and the other units of government to implement this tool, Brownfield TIF, or Land Bank 2.0. So we're not directly the developer, but we're the developer partner, and he's working to facilitate that in that community.
Thank you.
I have several times started to try and wrap my brain around all of the mechanisms involved in this. And it's incredibly complex. And it changes. So someone like you, and you do this, is so important to our making true progress. Because I can see where people start and they get overwhelmed. So having someone, we have a problem, our employers are begging for people, for workers, for local workers. Both families and seasonal. My granddaughter works at Anderson's, and he has kids in a house that he lived in. And he's not going to be able to do that forever. It's an incredibly expensive house, so he's working on other options. Our employers desperately need this house. Our families desperately need this house. And I think this would be a very important piece to our being able to make actual progress. because it is incredibly complex. Thank you for embracing it.
I realize I might have opened it up for questions too soon, so I'll let Trudy.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I just had two more slides to go through.
Oh,
Finish
sorry.
those up quick. That's all right. So we're on page 13.
Oh, that's good.
So I had two more bullet points under housing opportunities for the ARPA funds. So the next one is leverage or subsidy funds for projects. And that's really, we're talking about filling that gap between the completed costs and the sale costs. It's what we've done since 1993 when we did new housing construction projects here. It can help cover infrastructure, land costs, which is a big one. We know, even with the inflated cost of materials, we know square footage, how much something might cost. The land cost, and sometimes infrastructure is a little bit unknown. And if you can bring down the cost of the total project, then you bring down the cost of the unit and you bring down the cost to the home buyer. And that's how we get into that affordable and attainable gap there that we need to help out with. And we can recover those funds through sale of property, developer agreements, or TIF capture through brownfield plans. So we would be revolving those once we get those in. Organizations that can help us with that is Land Bank Authority, Homestretch, Habitat for Humanity, or private developers. And then finally, I wanted to mention the last one is financial support for the Land Bank Authority. When Jim Tischler was here from Michigan State Land Bank Authority, one of the things he pointed out is that the Land Bank Authority is the most powerful economic development tool that we have. People are just not realizing yet how much a land bank authority can do. And he pointed out that we are ahead of the game here in Leelanau County because we already understand how a land bank can assist with housing projects. And even though we've done small ones, we've had some successes already. And small projects are great because you're still bringing in units to a community. So funds for a land bank authority could be used to purchase land. We can purchase a home, rehab it, and sell it. We've actually done that. We did that with one of the housing projects down the new neighborhood, but we didn't have to rehab it. It was in such good shape, but we did have the funds at that time, so we could purchase that. We can conduct environmental studies through the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, as well as create brownfield plans and assist with infrastructure. And again, we have ways to recapture those funds if we can just get that beginning money to help out the Land Bank Authority. And it's also right here in the county. So I think it's a great thing. One of the other things I wanted to point out to you is that the target market analysis from November 2019 pointed out that Leelanau County needed more than, I think it was 650 units, about half split between rentals and single family. Single families being built, but not in that price range where we really needed the majority of homes. So we're still not having much success. And of course, we haven't had much success with rentals either. And also I heard at a housing session that Yarrow and I were both on this morning, is that even if there's state funds that become available, rural areas are going to find it very hard to qualify for any of them. It's competitive, we're rural, we're less dense, our population is lower, we don't have many walkable communities like cities, we're just not going to qualify for those funds. So we're looking to the ARPA funds to try to give a little boost here and help us keep going on and having more success with our housing.
I'm going to turn back to Yarrow and Chris. Thank you for all that you were doing through Housing North. Incredible conferences, incredible work.
Thank you.
You mentioned you have $30,000 towards the technical technician. How much are you looking for?
We are looking for $100,000 per year for 3 years.
That is spread out though, correct?
Spread out, yep, throughout the different. So our model right now is to have that be funded 50% through philanthropy and 50% through the units of government. So the grant was through the Township Foundation for $10,000 per year for 3 years.
So basically 300,000. And at that point, you're probably hoping that through grants or some other capacity, we can continue this position.
Yes, that it will either be absorbed by the community or that it will be moved into whatever the next phase is for that work. Mm-hmm.
Trudy mentioned the land bank, and John Gallagher's not here, but I wanted to commend John because he has been preaching this for quite some time, and I think he's convinced the Land Bank Authority that we have a powerful tool. And so I thank you for continuing to remind us of that.
I also spoke with Mayor Stanton yesterday. We were getting the toy program together for this week, which is a wonderful project we can do. And she mentioned a request, I believe she's requesting $85,000. I think to refresh. And that's for people who slip through the cracks. They don't qualify for the Northwest Michigan Community Action Agency funds. It typically is elderly people on one income with a leaky roof, or they're just in desperate need of repairs an awful lot of the time. Not only to make the homes energy efficient, but also just to make them more livable. So, and they have a unique position in the community in that they find, these people find them. Or they're people who are too proud to ask, and they find out just because they work with that population. But there are some really dire needs. And that's not a lot of money, but I will just speak to that. And another question, Trudy, would it be useful for you to have a housing coordinator? I know you are an expert in this, but you were a whole lot of hats.
Well, we had that housing position and we ended up, because of the grants through the state being basically diminished and focused in a different direction in new construction, not rehab, we ended up moving that position down to part-time and then eliminating it. So if we were to get back into that, it would take, I think, a part-time position to help out with that.
So it would be useful for you?
It could be, depending on what the county does with the ARPA funds. I have pointed out that there's other organizations here that put in requests as well for housing rehab funds. So those are other opportunities as well.
On your list of local agencies working on housing, I was having dinner the other night with a propane distributor, and he told me that the cost of home heating propane has almost doubled in the last year. Is a part of our contribution to the Community Action Agency, does that address home heating costs? I know it's on your list here, but is that just Leelanau Christian Neighbors?
No, I believe I listed all of them. And again, this is not exhaustive. This was to give you an idea of the different agencies working on this. The Community Action Agency, with the funds that they have contracted with Leelanau County, are limited to emergency rehab work. They may have other funds that they're using to cover those costs, or like Leelanau Christian Neighbors, who can also help with rent or utility bills. But for the funds that we're currently contracted with NMCAA, that's only for emergency repairs.
Well, just a editorial comment, if we have 40% or so of our population who are ALICE or below poverty, and heating costs have doubled in a year, it'd be nice if we could continue to talk about how we might at least use some of these funds to address that emergency. And I know that's what we had a public comment from Beth today, and I know we got a Leelanau Christian Neighbors recommendation, proposal, request in there, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we need more housing, and we need more internet, we need more towers, and we got to keep people warm. And I hope we can spend some of that on that.
Could I make one quick comment just about the ARPA funds? I feel like if Leelanau County are already ahead of the game by allocating funding towards these programs, it's likely you could be eligible for the state level funds that are coming through. So I think there's a win-win here, whereby developing and setting up some of these programs, if there is funding, and I will say Housing North is part of a statewide coalition through the Michigan Municipal League, watching that and watching their plan. And there was a lobbying day of action on the 30th, and there'll be more encouraging the state to come up with a plan for those funds to be put. And it's not just housing, it's many other categories, but I think you could leverage this money even further in your community by setting these things up now and putting them in place.
Yeah, this is a question for both you, Trudy and Yarrow. And Trudy, you mentioned the ratio between rental and purchasing, I think earlier, is what? Again, what was that number?
I mentioned the housing market study or the target market
Yeah, yeah.
analysis, is that what you're mentioning?
Yeah.
It was around 650. Do you have the number?
I wish I had it memorized.
50 or
sorry.
670 units, and it was about evenly split, if I remember right, between rental units that were new rental units needed as well as homes that were needed.
Well, the reason I was asking is I know there was PBS presentation a couple of days ago, it's Friday, on their nightly news, where they talked about land trusts. The California model is the one they were featuring for housing to, it's getting a lot of popularity, but to enable people to purchase their home. And I didn't know if we have a large enough population to warrant this, or if you've looked at that, if that's even viable for our area.
Yes, well, Larry, who's here, just formed a new Peninsula Land Trust.
See,
And
that's what happens when you come in late.
and I happen to be
Very
part of it as well. And so right now they're looking at, rental to meet some of the rental need, but home ownership could certainly be possible. And we know that community land trusts are one of the only ways to lock in affordability long-term. I can tell you it's been a desire of the community to learn more about this and bring this tool. And so in January, we'll have some workshops on that as well.
Excellent.
We actually did a few of our early projects, our new construction projects had community land trusts in them. And so that pulls the cost of the land value out of the price that the buyer has to pay.
Right.
And so we did do that many years ago.
So that's, well, Larry, we will be crossing paths soon.
Yes. Come to the land bank.
Could I ask one more question of Yarrow? If we had these technical services, is it possible that one of the services provided is work with developers to maybe designate some affordable housing as a part of any new development, or Timber Shores require or help or work with them to require some affordable housing as a part of that development, or working with the conservancy and saying you get your land tax free, but for that you got to give us a little piece of property for some affordable housing? I mean, can we get creative like that?
Yes, mostly. I can't say yes to all of those because there's some nuances in there. You have to have a gift that's freely given. But yes, definitely.
But I think we need to do that. When you sent us the list of all of the non-taxable land in our county, and I forget what percentage of our land.
It's a very significant.
But significant, and maybe there's some leverage there to build into.
And that's why it's so important that you have your communities ready as well, because if they're not ready and don't have that as any type of requirement, they're not going to get it.
Well, I guess I was wondering also about the technical services. So I mean, I worked on planning commission for Bingham for 12, 13 years. And how would this technical person help the developer when they come in to the planning commission?
That's a good question. They would probably start working with them well ahead of the time that they go to the planning commission. So that would be the idea, that that person would maybe be one of the first contacts to work through some of the issues they might come up against at the planning commission.
How do they find out that he's even available or she's even available?
Lots and lots of letting people know that that person is available. But in a way, it's Housing North is, letting people know that this is the go-to person, communicating with the townships and villages and letting them know. We're not always the first person that gets called right now, but we do get calls from developers, daily, if not weekly, and try to make those connections.
Yeah, because usually they have an architect or someone who's designed the whole plan, and then they come in with that person. So this would be on top of that, besides that then?
Or it would be a different kind of developer that maybe, is coming in and wanting to do affordable housing that hasn't gone through that. So a lot of times it's market rate versus affordable, housing developers. So there's a lot of different, if they want to truly make it affordable or less than affordable, make it to meet a certain need, there would need to be a lot more put into that project ahead of time to see how you can make those numbers work. So I guess it depends on the developer and it depends on the type of project.
Yeah, because I know Bingham set it up so that if they did so many affordable, then, they could get more than 1 or 2 acres. you know.
Yes, certainly, they're providing some.
Space, you know, nobody ever really used it.
So some of it is the community also letting the developers know what opportunities are out there and what their goals are. And that they have a goal for X number of affordable units and kind of packaging those and I guess doing an RFP or a request for interest. So that person would help with that process. Or could help with that process if that was an interest and goal of the community.
And that's a great opportunity for someone who's doing this technical assistance to help the local community change that. Because if it's not working, if no one's using that, why is it in the zoning ordinance? Find out why it's not being used and get it changed.
Yeah, we get a lot of calls with people up in arms when a zoning ordinance changed, but that doesn't always mean people are rushing out, you know, to do that work too. So I think a lot of it is letting communication about the tool and then making sure that change in that tool is what the community really wants and how to then implement it.
Any other questions? Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that brings us then to the health department. Space.
Yeah, just so
Five?
Oh, yeah, you're right. So now I have to take a 5-minute break and back in quarter two.
Yeah, thank you.
Tricia?
Go ahead, one at a time.
We have
When he's
a
home.
conflict right here. Yeah. What is it? I was just looking at
I know.
that our December.
He'll know this week.
LPS meeting on the 21st. I might see your.
No, not yet.
Construction.
It's too,
Mine's cold, I got mine.
Now that Larry has. Is it Larry?
So it's the board of Peninsula Housing, which I am on the board.
she is on the
So,
board.
so there we go. Okay, I was just gonna say.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Just because he.
So you know what?
Not just-
Oh, they're conservative.
The Peninsula.
Oh, yeah. No.
I submitted a proposal. For that.
For the
That is
covenant.
agenda. They're treated one
So,
same.
and when is that meeting?
Not everyone is considered. You did pass a resolution.
Like, call us back to order, please.
Yeah.
Good, well, thanks for all.
And so then we'll move on to D, which is the health department space update.
Yeah, just a quick update. Last time we met, Mr. Bunnick asked if we'd give us some ballpark numbers here. And so I met with John Richard, our engineer, along with Dodie Putney and Mr. Johnson from the health department about what their needs are. And if it is even feasible, there is space downstairs, as you know. We call one room the ugly room. The other room is kind of a partial fitness room for employee storage room. And then there's a cage area. They would be required to use all that space to fit if the entire department is to move. And that means obviously we would have to build another building for storage and move that stuff out because we still have storage. So Mr. Richard, if you want to go forward, could get me, I just asked for a ballpark number. I don't want these blueprints. I don't spend a lot of time and money on this. He said he'd try to get back to me by Christmas on a rough number, but it would mean us, we'd have to basically lose all the space we have downstairs and build another storage facility somewhere new on this campus. So probably by the first of the year, I'll have a rough ballpark number. They also would be willing to use partial space, like the environmental department works very closely with the Southern Conservation District. So if we didn't have all the space, that's a possibility. And once again, I think we're just in preliminary discussions. But Mr. Johnson works very closely with those people there. So if we didn't have all the space, but even part of the space, the health department would be very interested in having dialogue with us on that. So that's just a brief update. They have a lease, I believe, for 2 more years. 2 more years, yeah.
I mean, did Doe say they would be, if we did all the space, they would be interested in it or not?
Yeah, obviously they would have to talk about, yes, preliminary, yes. Ideally, they like to be in one space and they would love to be here.
Right.
We get calls on a regular basis, we get people coming in on a regular basis, thinking this is where they help me. Yes. The flip side is we would have to give up all our storage. We would have no storage space left. We would have to build another building somewhere because that truly, if you go down there, it is used quite a bit. And especially that caged area or each department.
Right.
So we would have to give up the 3 storage rooms we have now to accommodate their needs.
It would, but they wouldn't need the maintenance rooms?
No, we looked at that and this wouldn't make sense because we have, in the back of that, there's some equipment there and everything, and there's enough space.
Okay.
I mean, if we move that, we have to move all that maintenance equipment out too.
Okay.
And so that just doesn't make sense. The most logical, even for partial space, would be for the environmental health services to be across where the conservation district is. And there is probably enough space to meet their needs there, but that means we'd be losing all that storage space.
You know, I appreciate the concept, and if we had built an even larger courthouse, I think that would have been a feasible thing. But I'm not in favor of pursuing doing that to our building for a number of reasons. Number one, I did speak to some of the employees on the concept, and it wasn't a lot of support among those I talked to for the idea, because they use their cages a lot now. And if we were to make them go outside to a storage unit to get files or machines or information, etc., there wasn't a lot of support for that. I want to add another building to this campus if at all possible. So it would have to be on this campus if for storage, obviously. I don't want to, I think if anything, we should be encouraging the fitness room in the basement, considering what we do with our healthcare plan and the buy-in that we've got with our employees when it comes to the health of our employees. So I think then we should be expanding our fitness room down there in the sense of equipment, et cetera, making it even more inviting to our employees to use. The other thing, not only just the cages, the storage, that would absolutely leave us no room for expansion in the future. I mean, that would be taking all our extra space. So I think the best thing for the health department is to stay intact as one unit and take care of their needs.
Well, the other option is obviously keep everything we have here, build another building on campus for the health department. Instead of trying to retrofit something, I mean, that's just another option.
Where is that? I'm sorry, but they would build their own. We don't have to build them a house.
Well, we would have to help fund them. That's part of their request.
But
And we do an allocation from, just like this conservation district, we give them allocation. We use those allocated funds to renovate the lower level.
Naive question maybe, but right now we've got two health department buildings, one in Benzie County and one here. And do we need two buildings or do we need one main building and then a satellite? And
Well,
might a satellite be something that is just?
That's what basically this would be, and I'm on the health department, but I understand their building is in Benzie's where they have the majority of their staffing. And that's pretty long. I've been to that space before. I believe they share that space, don't they?
Yes, they do, and they're limited right now,
Really?
as they were discussing at the last meeting, they've outgrown that space.
But they definitely, like I said, just preliminary, I got a question, they definitely need a presence in both counties.
Right, we were with Grand Traverse at one time, and then Benzie, Leelanau. And then when Grand Traverse left, then it was just Benzie, Leelanau. So they have to have, basically, they feel separate buildings for those that do Leelanau, those that, and especially now with early childhood, that's only Leelanau, and it's at the health department. So they want to have a separate presence in Leelanau County.
For some of their drop-in services, they had one building, for example, Little County residents would have to drive almost to Frankfurt, between Frankfurt and Beulah, which is very prohibitive, or vice versa if they had one here. So I got the impression they'd really need a presence in both counties.
And so another possibly naive question, but when we drive up our driveway, we have that on the right below the building, there's that big flat area. And I keep thinking something should be there, you know? I think it would look good if there was something other than a big old gravelly field.
I have a feeling that one of your colleagues doesn't agree.
Well, it doesn't look good just there.
Well, I mean, I know that if the sheriff gets the boat, he has no place to store it. He already has one boat that doesn't fit into the pole building that he has. So he would need at least a pole building big enough for those two boats, so he doesn't have to take the one all apart, take the wheels off of the thing and move it sideways and stuff. So that was my thinking. If we're gonna do that, I just don't think that such a problem if they have to go over to a pole barn or thing, or when they have, or they just have the maintenance man go over to the storage for them back. And to me, the whole idea of building this building the size we did and adding the basement so that we could consolidate all Leelanau County government entities together. And that's why when the conservation district left the old co-op building, we worked hard and got them into here. And I think that has worked out tremendous. On top of that, it's a shared cost in this building. So overall, it would really serve the people of Leelanau County very, very well. Because again, we would reduce the cost every time you have a separate building, whether it's internet services, all the things that the county does could be shared with them and the cost split. So, I mean, if they fit in here, they can fit. I think it's to make it convenient for storage would be I understand what you're saying, but I don't want to make the employees go outside, but I think for how often they go to storage, if it's once a week, I think that we can do that for how often the county people come to this building looking for the health department. Or they have to go to the health department, and then come back over to here. And if we put them together, I really do believe that's what we need. And if the sheriff has offered the gym, I mean, I don't know that, he said that's available too. So maybe that could be storage. We wouldn't even have to do another building, other than if he gets his boat.
Oh, so if he gets his boat, he can use his gym.
No, no, but he's saying that gym really doesn't get used. There's one person who uses it maybe once a month, so he said, and I think it's probably him. Mr. Long.
Well, I will disagree with the argument that when we built this building, we thought we would put the health department in. Because the health department did have their own building, and I do not really recall any discussion on that at all. But since then, we haven't, you know, we had, well, the argument was made for the Secretary of State, you know, let's bring Secretary of State here because people all think we're one-stop shop here. And we are not one-stop shop. I know when I had to go to Grand Traverse County for a permit, I didn't just assume it was on Boardman Avenue. I looked it up and found out where I had to go for a permit, and it was out on Lafreniere Road. So, you know, they've got different buildings in different places. It worked out just fine. I didn't really have a problem with that at all. I think what we might do is probably, we could survey the employees and ask them, but I know they're not going to be thrilled with the idea of, for as much as they use their cages, and they do use them, but I understand a lot, that they're not going to want to go out in the snow to a storage building that one is heated. And, you know, so you look at our campus, and what, are we not going to be satisfied till every square inch of it is covered with a roof? We're already talking about a building for towers. We're talking about a possible building for the sheriff's boat, possibly. Or we got our dumpsters up here. You're gonna put a roof over recycling. That would be another roof we could add. Add another storage building and make the employees walk up there to it. Let's add a whole nother building down below, and I don't know. I think we need to be careful on that. And I think the health department is a separate entity, and should find another solution.
Well, at our next meeting, which I assume will be in January, at least have some very sketchy ballpark numbers, so at least look at those and kind of see if it's even worth doing. It may come back that, because he's getting their square footage request.
Yeah.
To see if it even works. So the question is, could it even potentially work? And if it's yes, at what cost? So we'll have more information to you in January.
And I can appreciate your comment that it maybe is feasible to build, given renovation costs, it may be. I know they are paying rent at a fairly substantial rate. I don't, you know, that building, the Binsfield building came into being long before I was associated with government, but I know they've never really owned it. They've always paid rent and been responsible for all repairs and this kind of thing to the building. And I don't think that part has changed in terms of repair and lighting and all of that. So if we could, and I think it comes down to just trying to find a solution, what might work for them and for us, and to save a little bit of money and effort to the taxpayers if we can.
Well, we'll have more data and information at the January meeting.
Right, well, because it's up in 2 years, I mean, it would take close to that to do it. So that's why I'm saying now, and plus if we could use the Arpa funds would really, you know, make it cost benefit. We could do that.
And as you know, you do allocate funds every year to the health department, which some of those does cost paid for their rental, just like with the conservation district. I believe our payback, we estimate to be 7 years. I think we actually got our money back quicker than 7 years because of the partnership that was formed, because they were paying rent before. So I'll just
I
keep you
appreciate
updated.
you looking at it. I think we should keep, I do hear what you're saying, Commissioner Walker. But I do think that we did plan to try to move everything for the county here, if at all possible. I know that was always that if. So even if because I know they're really crowded for space right now, and that's why they're talking about at least the environmental moving here. If they can get a renew their lease after 2 years. Any other comments? And we move on then to other issues.
I thought we'd just have a discussion, how you wish to proceed with all the requests that you have. I thought it was a good start. You have some good information. And I'm thinking we do it the same way as we did with our budget process, where you have the data and you determine who you wish to have come in to give you more information or presentation. Because you really need to probably look at the big picture before you start allocating funds, I would think. And so we talked about at some point inviting some of these people in. So just like last meeting, you kind of came to consensus on who you wanted to hear today. Probably the best next step would be pick a date. I'm guessing it's going to be in January, and see who else you'd like to bring in.
Well, I like that, and I would really like to have a session where we invite Mary Stanton, Community Action Agency, somebody to come in and address the unmet needs, the rehab, the housing assistance, the food assistance, and all of the stuff that our struggling families are dealing with. We got several proposals, and I worry some about how we do that. But I think we ought to have that conversation and invite, like we did today, a panel of people to come in and visit with us about that.
So Mary Stanton.
Mary?
So Little Christian Neighbors?
Yes.
And I think Community Action Agency would be helpful to be a part of that as well. Beth Verhey has been working with a number of people and submitted and persistently comes and talks to us about what she submitted. Thank you, Beth. And so we ought to, she could sit at the table. She's worked closely with Mary Stanton, I think. Yeah.
The mental health proposal, since that is a huge issue right now and even more huge because of the pandemic. And I think Child and Family Services had a proposal, interesting proposal in here as well. Let me double check. Yes, the same thing.
And Meals on Wheels was one, maybe a day with all of those social agency kinds of needs.
Because I got to put them all sort of together.
I also like, I don't do a lot, but Empire has a couple of sewer related issues. They're not real expensive, but I think they get a grand total, the village gets a grand total of $36,000. They don't get much. And they're very willing to spend some of their own money, but they have some very targeted small requests.
Well, and the sheriff wants to talk with us too, so.
Yeah, the sheriff approached me first and then approached Mr. Buck and I. He approached me, he wanted to be on agenda this afternoon, but I said that decision was made. And he's requesting $2,500 per employee for premium hazard pay. And I told him that you did pass a resolution and you left out premium pay, but he still wants to come. But in fairness, we don't have a proposal from him. Everyone else has a proposal in the book. So I don't think we're approved to have it on agenda until he submits a proposal at least. But both Mr. Bunnick and I told him that when we did a resolution last month, we specifically left out premium pay. You don't have to have him on the agenda. It's up to you. So I guess we're asking for advice. He was quite insistent that he come. So.
I think we've had that discussion, and I'm not interested in talking about using this money for salary, wages, or bonus.
And I would agree with that.
So, okay,
So I would say from consensus. Not invited. All right, that's it.
so that's a pretty full agenda for next time.
Yeah.
If you look at it, actually, and you have to remember in January, you're gonna have meeting, you have your organizational meeting, then the second Tuesday and the third Tuesday, so January usually are pretty full of meetings to begin with. So this will be, I assume, in addition to one of those meetings.
Yeah.
Because really, if you want to do all of these, I can't see piggyback another meeting out of
No.
fairness to all these people, and in fairness to all of you who have to sit here. So if you have a calendar,
Yes. So, empty calendars.
I assume everyone's saying no more meetings in December, correct?
Oh, yeah. Let's say that. Well, yeah, because we're only meeting that last meeting of the month. what
It's
is
the
it,
29th.
29th?
Your organizational meeting is on January 4th, your executive January 11th, and your regular is January 18th.
I don't remember if we have everybody for that 29th. I don't think we do, do we?
Everyone with the exception of maybe Mr. Russell.
It's all up to my grandson. If he's willing to come with me.
But
That's right.
that,
We're gonna bring all your
I
grandkids,
think
so
you should be
I
able
would
to
say
say
let's go into January.
yeah, I don't think you can, we generally do it in December. And I don't know how many of these agencies would want to come in last week of December. So like I said, the 4th, 11th, and 18th, you already have meetings scheduled.
So are you looking at for a separate date?
Well, I'm just, it's up to the
I
7
think
of
we
you.
should look at it tomorrow night when we have hopefully more.
No, you will not.
No, this will be it.
If you want to look at your calendar, we can discuss it tomorrow, next update right now,
Is the organization meeting at 9?
9 o'clock, 9 AM on the 4th.
Maybe if we can discuss it tomorrow, because I know I haven't put in all my standing
Yeah.
meetings for next year.
Usually the organization meeting is not last, that
usually.
No, it doesn't. Unless we're touring.
Be a problem if we did it in the afternoon on the 4th?
So, to 7.
I could do that.
For here.
That'd be all right.
Tentatively scheduled for.
You want to talk about it tomorrow night and just
Yeah.
confirm?
So we kind of figure for 1 o'clock.
Except that this is. The population's not gonna change.
No, for the forward. Oh, you mean tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Well, we may have input from them by then.
We probably will.
Okay.
They both have. They're not available,
Okay.
but we can schedule it for the 4th. I mean, this is a date everyone should have on the calendar anyway.
Right.
And usually our organization meeting does not last long. So if we say even noon, or at the end of organization or noon,
Right, yeah. Are you planning for speakers as per normal or not this year?
we have not, we sometimes had a workshop that was always in December, not as part of the organization.
Okay.
And you're not electing a chairman this year, so it should go fairly smooth.
Okay.
At least traditionally, your organization meetings have not lasted long. So even if we say noon, if we start at 9 o'clock, that's still hoping to give you time to have lunch before the meeting. So time to shoot for January 4th. And
Yeah, for it and executive.
Yeah.
7 o'clock for you.
but all 7 of you should know about the 4th being the date. That's been on your calendar all year, so that should work in there.
Yes, it-
And I'll try to get as many of these organizations as possible to come in. I know the sense of urgency to get things done and money, but I have to remember and have to remind ourselves that we are a step ahead of almost every county. I just got 2 emails this afternoon, people willing to come in and do surveys to help counties, help them see what the needs are from the community. So truly, we are the only county that I know, at least in North Michigan, that is this far along and has actually asked for input. And we received a lot of great input.
Well, and we still don't even have final rules. We're pretty sure what they're gonna be.
Yes, there is a movement to give more flexibility. If you read the MAC or the NACO things, there's a movement. I think all of you got an email last week urging you to contact your congressman to provide more flexibility for counties. A lot of people are saying, let us decide how to spend the money.
Right, but we don't want to make a decision and find out we have to reverse it.
Yeah.
You know, or we can't, or it's not gonna be covered.
I'm guessing if you look at what's on tab 4, that's a report there we have to allocate. If we spend any dollars, we put it in a tab. I don't think that would change much because those are pretty general categories. We may have more flexibility. I don't imagine having less flexibility. It's having more flexibility.
When do you anticipate the other 4 or 2.1 million?
Oh, it'll be July.
July?
There's a firm date.
Oh,
Yeah. The money's been allocated. So that's
right.
There's no more action that's required at the federal level for the second half. That's all.
Good. Any other items for the
The
agenda?
question is the state going to provide more money?
Right.
From that, it's federal money. That's the big question. And I'm guessing everyone is thinking, yes, it's how much at what level and what are the conditions. But the money's sitting there, so it has to be allocated.
So we looked at the next meeting. No, we haven't looked at the next meeting date, have we? Or yes,
January 4th.
that we're gonna do it on January.
Well, I think that's what,
Yes.
after this,
Organization.
yeah,
It's both.
after the,
Oh, that's what you, okay, I guess I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I thought you just wanted to move it in the afternoon.
no.
No, okay, so this next meeting will be at noon after the organizational.
The first people come in, we should say, I'm sure we're done before noon. Let's just say noon,
Okay,
because I hate to have them come. We should be done.
yeah,
And I hate to be done at 10:30 and then start the meeting and have people sit here. So
Right.
I think since we're inviting people,
Okay.
let's just say noon.
I'm glad that you clarified that.
And there's no reason that we shouldn't be done by noon with the organization.
Okay.
And it still should give us time to have lunch.
And anything else? So then we move on to public comment.
Looking at me. Do I have something to say? I did have the housing needs assessment that Trudy was referring to. And it was suggesting we need 367 rentals and 301 owner occupied units. Although I personally think that I wouldn't disparage the efforts of rehabbing or Habitat's building owner occupied homes. It's not getting us there fast enough if you add up the numbers that Trudy had. And Ty certainly has some experience with building 4 homes. To build 4 homes, could you build 30 rental units with the same amount of efforts and make a bigger dent in our housing needs? So that's what goes on in my head. I was also listening to some national news report on the number of unfilled jobs in the country and the unemployment rate and how low it is. So what I would suggest is that we are in a competitive market with everybody else to build affordable housing. We have the ace in the hole of being a very attractive place to live, but if we don't build those houses, those units, people will, our employment pool will move somewhere else where they can find a place to live. So yes, we're way ahead, but we're still way behind. And thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, any commissioner comments?
Well, I have one, and it's related to the pending legislation on short-term rentals. And I think that further complicates the housing issue seriously in this county, and will expand the need for rental housing and affordable housing. Because I understand property rights stuff, but if we allow all property owners to ignore local short-term rental ordinances and do whatever as they want with their property, we're gonna have a problem. Leelanau Township has lost a librarian this week She was living in Sutton's Bay. For 2 years, she tried to find a place in the county that she could live on at her librarian salary. The place in Sutton's Bay where she lived, she had to move out in the summer months because it was a short-term rental. And then return in the fall. And she finally has given up on Leelanau Township and Leelanau County and moved to Bay City for the same kind of a job, but cheaper housing.
Any other comment? We are adjourned.